Thomas Gilman, Kyle Dake, Levi Haines. There's some pretty crazy names being suggested that could follow David Taylor from State College, Pennsylvania, all the way over to Stillwater, Oklahoma.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Because of Cale Sanderson, Penn State, and ultimately just some outside factors, it is going to be difficult to get some wrestlers and potential coaches away from Happy Valley in David Taylor's case. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Help me welcome him back, the voice of Penn State Wrestling, Jeff Byers, to talk about this and get his thoughts and reaction to David Taylor going to Oklahoma State. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Jeff, I've heard some crazy names being thrown out as far as who could follow David Taylor to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Levi Haines, Kyle Dake, Thomas Gilman, and some of them make a little bit of sense. Some of them not so much. I think Levi Haines is impossible because of the transfer portal being closed, and he is from Pennsylvania. But I wouldn't be surprised if some of David Taylor's closest friends from the wrestling club ultimately follow to be assistant coaches. Jeff, who do you think could ultimately end up leaving to go with Taylor?
Yeah, I think initially it's not going to be any kind of a mass exodus. David obviously has very good relationships with a lot of these guys, but I think so does the coaching staff and the other kids on the team and the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club guys. I would not be surprised. This is not an inside information, but certainly it is presumed that Jimmy Kennedy is going, and I'm presuming that as well. I would think Thomas Gilman would make a lot of sense. I think Gilman, I believe, wants to get into coaching. I believe he probably, with the results of the trials, is ready to move on from his competitive career. And that just seems like a natural fit and a good start for David. So my expectation is that at the very least, Jimmy Kennedy and likely Thomas Gilman would head out as members of the coaching staff for David in Stillwater. There may be some others that follow. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not privy to any of the details, but my guess is that David has a pretty wide ability to implement what he wants to do and a pretty deep pocketbook with which to do it. So, I won't be surprised if there's another person or two affiliated with the program in one way or another that follows suit. I'm not expecting, and again, I could be completely wrong in this. I don't know anything inside. I'll be, I guess not shocked, but I'll be very surprised if any of the starters, either from last year or projected starters in the upcoming season, would leave the program. Just because, again, it's such a good situation that they have here at Penn State. And while they may have good relationships with David Taylor, and I know many of them do, again, I think they also have very good relationships with the coaching staff here. And I think, obviously, if they were a starter or a projected starter, I mean, you have a chance to be part of an historically great program here. So, I know there's a lot of guys that were trained by David Taylor, but again, that's not an uncommon thing where you see somebody trained by an individual and then go on to a different school and have success. So I'm not expecting initially that there will be many, if any, wrestlers following David from Happy Valley out to Stillwater. I do think as we go down the road, and we've talked about this many times, I think when you look at the remarkable recruiting that Cale has done and the staff have done, again, there's 10 starting positions, and Penn State over the next couple of years is going to have, 15-ish elite recruits. Well, simple math tells you not everybody's going to stay.
Yeah.
And now you would think a likely destination for a lot of those guys, if they can't crack the starting lineup and don't feel like sitting for 2 or 3 or 4 years at Penn State, you would think, yes, I could see in the coming years guys that get squeezed out there at 165, 174, 184. Hey, let's find a landing spot out with somebody that we're already familiar with, and obviously an historically great program. So, we'll see. I am sure David is talking to as many people as he can. And listen, he's, this is the world of competitive athletics and the nature of today's world. And so, I mean, David would be foolish to not have conversations and see who he could get. I don't think initially any of the so-called big names would go. Now, could a Terrell Barraclaw, who's already in the portal, end up there?
Yes.
Of course, that would not surprise me at all. And again, my guess is over the next few years, you'll see some of these guys head out, but I don't think it's going to be guys that would otherwise have been starters at Penn State. At least not in many cases. Again, might you have an exception here or there?
Sure.
I suppose that's possible. I'm not expecting it.
There's a couple factors here. I mean, one, David Taylor wasn't a coach at Penn State. I mean, sure, he trained specific wrestlers. He worked with them. He's part of the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, but he wasn't a paid coach. He wasn't a paid recruiter. By proxy, he helped, but at the end of the day, his relationships began and ended with himself, whereas Cale Sanderson is, the face, the spokesperson for the Penn State wrestling program, along with Cody and Casey, right, and everything else. And then the transfer portal part of it, it's closed. Levi Haines and where he is in his career, that was one of the first names thrown out there. Oh, Levi Haines will go into the portal. He'll follow him. That's his mentor. Levi Haines is a Pennsylvania born and raised kid. He's from Central Pennsylvania. He's going to stay and finish his career at Penn State, even when the portal would open up in a year's time, especially since he is a starter and he's not going to be taken out of the lineup. Even though we did speculate that there's a possibility of a redshirt, but he's not going to lose his starting spot, right? That's my point. But David Taylor, the transfer portal does exist, and it could hurt him in his start at Oklahoma State because wrestlers can't follow him to Stillwater, but they can leave Oklahoma State since there was a coaching change, right? So it's an interesting dynamic of how he's going to get started, but he's going to have all the resources in the world. And Oklahoma State's team, one way or another, is going to be full of talent next season. It's a matter of what David Taylor can do with talent that he didn't necessarily bring in himself.
Yeah, and I think, this is where the NIL will come into play, David Taylor's name and reputation. And again, I don't know anything, so I'm just truly speaking off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. But while I think some are speculating this may hurt Penn State, and it could. I'm not downplaying the possibility. I don't think initially, at least, this is going to have any kind of a major impact on the Penn State program. Where I think this could be a bigger impact is Iowa. A lot of big name portal guys have been presumed to be going to Iowa, and they may very well still end up there. Yeah. But I have to believe that an Andrew Alirez or a Wyatt Hendrickson, or at least going to listen to a David Taylor if he picks up the phone and says, hey, what do you think about Oklahoma State? Again, I don't know what all's involved here, but I have to believe that Oklahoma State would be able, NIL-wise, to offer comparable opportunities for guys like Alirez and Hendrickson and anybody else. I mean, I think when you're looking at the three schools that I think are in wrestling that are best set up for NIL opportunities, it's Penn State, Iowa, and Oklahoma State. And, Ohio State and Michigan may be in that mix as well. And maybe
Sure.
there's even a couple of other schools. I don't know. I'm presuming that like NC State and Virginia Tech, while they may have good opportunities, wouldn't be able to match what those schools are doing. But Oklahoma State, I think, is going to be very competitive. And with David Taylor's name and reputation, again, I think they at least get in the door with a lot of these folks before they make their final decision on a destination.
Oklahoma State doesn't make a move like this unless they think that they can be a dynasty in wrestling, just like Penn State. But will it actually threaten what Cale Sanderson has built? We're going to discuss that on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Are you hyped for the NBA playoffs? Well, imagine yourself at a live game with that playoff atmosphere. Gametime can take that dream and make it into a reality as the NBA's authorized ticket marketplace. And get this, prices actually drop on Gametime as tip-off gets closer. You browse the app anytime, you can see those playoff matchups, and you can get some pretty sweet deals. From the last-minute tickets to the panoramic seat view, so you can see where you're sitting, you know your point of view, so you're not second-guessing what it would look like. Gametime's got it all, plus the lowest price guaranteed. You get last-minute ticket deals. You get flash deals. You can even get zone deals where you pick the section and Gametime will pick the best seats available to you. Solid ticket coverage allows you to enjoy that peace of mind with every purchase. So what are you waiting for? Are you ready to snag those playoff tickets? Download Gametime today, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And remember, you can keep up with Jeff outside of Penn State wrestling. You can listen to his daily morning show on Fox Sports 98.7 FM in State College. If you're out of the area, you can stream it at 987thefox.com and subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Jeff, jumping back into it. I mean, Oklahoma State, they've seen what Cale Sanderson has done, and it's almost a little bit of deja vu. Cale Sanderson leaves Big 12 country. Iowa State goes to Penn State. Boom, dynasty. It's not that simple, but that's, how it happened, if you want to break it down simplistically. Kind of the same thing here. Okay, let's take a disciple of Cale Sanderson, drop him now in Big 12 country, but it's kind of ironic how this has happened. So David Taylor, I guess, is the immediate. At some point, this was going to happen. What were your initial thoughts? Do you think, hey, Oklahoma State and Penn State are basically going to split back and forth? This is a threat to the dynasty. I don't think it is. I think Oklahoma State's now closer, but I still think Penn State's going to be number one, and that's fine if the Pokes are going to be number two every season. Like you said, this is an immediate threat to Iowa, but I think 5 to 10 years from now, this is a long-term threat to Iowa, Michigan. We saw what Cornell did this past season. I just think it's too difficult. You might be able to take some points away and a wrestler or two from Penn State, but not what they have built. The gap is just too big.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great hire by Oklahoma State. And, I've been talking to a few folks, and I know there are some people that feel badly for Coleman Scott, and I do as well. I think Coleman thought that he was getting the guy, the job, and I think Coleman would have done a good job. I do think David Taylor is one of those splash hires, and I do think with his leadership, his vision, his competitiveness, I do think this changes the game for Oklahoma State. And listen, things can change quickly in college sports, and the NIL component is no doubt going to be worth watching here in the coming years. I do think right now Penn State is uniquely well positioned to continue with what Cale Sanderson, Cody Sanderson, and Casey Cunningham have built and have been doing. I just think the overall, the name recognition and the star power is there, but I also just think now they really have shown their ability to adapt, to stay on top of the ever-changing world of college wrestling and college athletics.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to change. Now, does this change the competitive dynamic? It does. I think that this is another program now that is on the verge. But, am I expecting that Oklahoma State will come in and be nose to nose and kind of back and forth with Penn State? I'm not, but that doesn't mean I could be wrong about that. Because I do think David Taylor is going to get in with just about anybody he wants, much like Cal Sanderson. I think Oklahoma State's recruiting goes back to truly a national recruiting base. And obviously, David, you would figure, is going to get some very good guys out of Pennsylvania in the near future. There's a lot of guys that obviously have good relationships with him. He has good relationships with them and their families. And I do think this changes both the recruiting dynamic and just the competitive dynamic in college wrestling. I still think that Cal Sanderson is the greatest coach I've ever seen or been around. And for my money, I still think he's going to go down as at least as good of a coach as we've ever had in any sport at any level in this country. And I just think when you look at the overall, the win-loss record, the way he's done it, the degree of domination, but also the way he kind of revolutionized the way I think people think about wrestling coaching and the approach that folks take to it. I just think when you combine all of that stuff together, you're still talking about, again, maybe the best period that's ever done it. I think David Taylor is going to be very good. I would not be surprised if Oklahoma State wins a national title or two here over the next decade. I think David is going to get them in a very elite level, and I think it's going to happen very quickly just because of his connections and with what the transfer portal has now. I do think this is now a once again a destination spot for college wrestling recruits. But I still think Penn State is the place to be right now. And when you look at the track record of success, you look at what just happened with the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, and 2/3 of the Olympic team are going to be comprised of Nittany Lion Wrestling Club members. You still have a third of the team will be Penn State grads. I still think Penn State is the team here for the foreseeable future. But I think Oklahoma State now, at least in my mind, is propelled to being right there with, Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, obviously, is the teams that can pose the biggest threat or challenge to Penn State, and maybe can sneak in there and get a title or two here in a relatively down year for Penn State. But again, as you look at it right now, Zach, I'm just not seeing that down year here over the next 5 years for Penn State. And that's even if, David does do what I'm not expecting and get a couple of the guys that I think will be starters here, even if they decide, we're going to follow David. There's just such depth, elite depth now in this Penn State program that, it's hard for me, at least in the moment, to see how Penn State will just be dethroned as the king of college wrestling right now.
Still to come, David Taylor. Of course, this is a surprising move for Taylor for Oklahoma State. We're going to try to make some sense of it, how long this is going to last, if this is a career type of move, and the only move in his career that David Taylor is going to make. We'll see how it ends up, and we'll discuss that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go, and I know what you're thinking. Flag on the play, you've already talked about that, but there is so much good stuff in this game to tell you about. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. And there's so much to get. unique stickers that you can trade with a friend, complete albums for bigger prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis when you want to taunt your friends after you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting each and every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. It's not include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. So there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench. Go download it now for free on the App Store or Google Play. That is Monopoly Go. Game on. Oklahoma State is taking a gamble. They go outside of the program, truly outside culturally, and they go and get David Taylor when they had Coleman Scott right there to continue the tradition of Cowboys wrestling. And I understand the appeal of it with David Taylor, disciple of Cale Sanderson, right? He was in the wrestling club. He's one of the greatest pound for pound wrestlers in history. But again, didn't sound like he was their first choice. I talked to Cody Stovall of Locked On Oklahoma State, and he told me that David Taylor wasn't exactly their first choice. They actually contacted Casey Cunningham to be the next head coach of Oklahoma State first before pivoting to David Taylor, almost as, I don't want to say a backup plan, but their original idea was that maybe we could get Casey Cunningham.
Well, listen, I think if you're any elite program, and Oklahoma State is certainly an elite program. Again, for folks that don't know, and I don't know, maybe there's, I guess if you've grown up in the last 15 years, maybe you're thinking that, hey, Penn State wrestling is just dominant. We heard that Iowa used to be good. Just so you're clear, Oklahoma State has won 34 national titles. That is more than any college team in any college sport. So you were talking about the greatest tradition of not just college wrestling, of any college program, any football, basketball, wrestling, track and field, baseball, softball, you name it, the greatest tradition for a program in terms of national championships. Oklahoma State has 34. So this is the standard bearer in all of college athletics. So again, this is, the equivalent of being Duke basketball or Kentucky basketball or Alabama football as your first coaching gig. I think Casey Cunningham, I've gotten to know him pretty well, and I don't think being a head coach is what drives him. And I think if anything was going to draw him away, again, I don't know the numbers involved, but I know they're substantial. And, I just think Casey really likes what he has going here at Penn State, likes the situation he's in, obviously loves and trusts Cale and Cody. And I just think the three of them love what they have going here. And I just don't think any of them want to disrupt it. They are very comfortable. I think, that I'm not going to say money doesn't matter, but they're all very comfortable with what they're making. I don't think any of them are looking for a big change in lifestyle or anything like that. And so it does not surprise me that they called and offered Casey, and it doesn't surprise me that they turned him down. Truthfully, I think if you're Oklahoma State, probably worth calling Cale and say, hey, is there anything we could do? Why would you not make that phone call at least? And I don't know whether they did or didn't. And obviously, again, I think Cale is very, very happy with Penn State.
I know what you mean.
But so, as far as David Taylor and the hire, this is where I'm at. I don't think there's anybody else that, and there's a great lineage of Oklahoma State products who are in the coaching ranks. You look at what Pat Pavolizio is doing at North Carolina State, Chris Pendleton in Oregon State, obviously Coleman Scott at North Carolina, and I think he thought he was in line here to get the job.
Right.
Those are all great options. I don't think any of them have the national impact that hiring David Taylor does.
Okay.
I think David Taylor gets you in the door with anybody. I think if you are a hot elite recruit in high school, and your mom or dad picks up the phone and says, "Hey, I have David Taylor on the line,"
Yeah.
you're taking that call, right? You're at least listening to what he has to say, just as you would with Cale Sanderson. So I think immediately, again, Oklahoma State is in the door with just about anybody that they would be looking for. Now, whether or not you close the deal and whether you win the head-to-head battles against Cale Sanderson and Penn State, I don't know. We'll see. David is obviously a very big name now. We were just talking about this up here that, there's probably some kids now that are coming up through that don't know about Cale Sanderson's competitive exploits. They know him as a great coach,
right?
But they may not know just how accomplished of an athlete he was. You certainly know that about David Taylor. So,
yes.
And David Taylor's technical expertise is right there with anybody in the country, Cale included. I mean, he knows wrestling, obviously, inside and out. But and again, I could be wrong on this. I just think at the end of the day, if you are being offered comparable scholarship opportunities, and that's, another factor here. But if you're being offered similar money by Penn State and Oklahoma State, I think even with David Taylor there, it would be tough to turn down Penn State, and especially if you're in, let's say the eastern half of the country. So again, I do think this changes things quite a bit for Oklahoma State. I think it opens up new possibilities, and I think Oklahoma State almost instantly becomes once again very competitive on the national scene. Whether or not they're winning national championships here in the next 5 years or even 10 years, again, we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But I do think they're going to be in the mix. I think they will be consistently a top 3 program now with David Taylor out there.
Jeff, this is the last idea I want to finish up with, because now we have an idea of Oklahoma State's perspective from our point of view, right? Being around Penn State, of course, you're the voice of Penn State wrestling. I do this show. But what about David Taylor's decision, right? It wasn't necessarily the first option. It seemed like there was some convincing that needed to be done, that he was tentatively saying no, and there had to be, renegotiate. But this was an ongoing process, that David Taylor wasn't like, yes, let's not out of the park, let's go. It took some discussions, some further discussions. Why does David Taylor make a move like this? He was showed a little bit of hesitancy. Maybe it was money. Maybe it's because he's, been in Pennsylvania for the longest time, built a family here, built a farm in Pennsylvania. So why does I don't want this to come off as a stupid question, right? Anybody who's offered the head coaching job at Oklahoma State, Casey Cunningham denied it, but why does David Taylor feel like now is the time to take this type of job?
Yeah, so I don't know. I have not talked to David yet. I'm hoping in the next week or so. I'm trying to let him get his bearings, but I did reach out and just congratulate him, and I do think I'm guessing this was not an easy decision for him. As you said, he's now lived here longer in the State College area, longer than he has anywhere in his life. Now he's 33 years old. So, but for 15 years now, he's been here to a very large degree. I think he grew up here, meaning went from boy to man to a large degree here. Certainly his family and David have an everlasting affinity for Cale Sanderson and an amazing relationship there. And as you said, he and his wife have the K2 business in town, and he has the farm. His parents actually just moved here within the last I don't know what it is now, 6 months or so. So, I mean, this was not, and Jimmy Kennedy, for folks that don't know, is David's brother-in-law and is obviously the third assistant, or has been the third assistant for Penn State. So there's, very strong roots here. That being said, I think David has always wanted to be a college coach. With the loss at the Olympic trials, now I think you're kind of looking at what is next, what is my next step. And here comes this job opening at Oklahoma State. Why not at least throw my hat in the ring? And then as they talked, again, I think it's a pretty tough gig to turn down. And I don't know the money involved, but it has to be substantial money. I mean, they have very deep pockets, and the wrestling program is extremely important out there. And I just think it's one of those things where while it may be difficult to say goodbye here, I also think it's just too good of an opportunity as that first chance. And yeah, I mean, again, I don't know how it's going to play out, but could I see a scenario where David Taylor is there for the next 30 years and is, goes down as a legend? Absolutely. I can definitely see that. I think David is a very loyal guy, has very big visions, and again, has a very good understanding of what it takes to build a championship team. He watched it from the ground floor up here with Cale Sanderson, and he's a very bright guy. And I'm not saying he's not going to try to replicate Cale, but I think he's certainly going to take a lot of lessons learned, apply some of his own touches to it, and again, I think he'll be very successful. Exactly how successful, and when you start measuring by national champions and or team titles, I don't know how all of that's going to play out, but I think he's going to do an exceptionally good job. And I just think this was an opportunity at the end of the day that Oklahoma State made too attractive for him to be able to say no to as a first opportunity to get into it and be very competitive at a very high level in a short order. Again, I think Oklahoma State could very well end up being a top 3 or 4 team this coming season, but certainly within the next couple of years, they are going to be a team that is at least chasing at the heels of Penn State, and will be in the mix there for, again, top 2 or 3 finishes, I think, pretty consistently.
It really, from Penn State's point of view, it really is sad to see him go for a variety of reasons, but I got to say, this is going to be a lot of fun. It's exciting for the sport of college wrestling. It's nice up in Happy Valley when you're rooting for the Nittany Lions, when you're talking about them, that yes, all they do is win. They win and then they win some more, but now there's going to be a competitive shift, and good luck to David Taylor to see what he can do to actually, I want to, disrupt the power structure that Penn State has built. And it's always an exciting time when we get to talk to Jeff Byers on the show, the voice of Penn State wrestling. You can check out his radio show, Fox Sports 98.7 FM, In-State College, 8 to 10 a.m. and 8 to 10 a.m. every single weekday. You can stream it at 987thefox.com. Jeff, thanks so much for the time, and can't wait to catch up again very shortly soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Zach.
And once again, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you enjoyed this conversation, like the episode, share it with friends and family. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today available on YouTube and now for free on the Fire TV channels app.